Alright, welcome back to the pt2 build. I wasn't sure if I was going to do another one of these videos for this project, but based on some comments from my last video, I decided I'd go ahead and do it. What I'm doing right here is I am just marking out for some half-lap joinery. These will be the drawer runners for the pt2. I've never done half-laps. A lot of things in this project were the first time I've ever done them, so there's definitely a learning curve. It's one thing watching and another thing actually applying. So I think they came out all right. There were a couple mistakes and a couple obvious mistakes, but you'll never see them when the drawers are in place, so it doesn't matter, I guess. I'm just dummy proofing my marks right here. It's probably not necessary, but for me, especially with this being the first time, I want to dummy proof them by marking exactly where I'm cutting. I apologize for this clip being so shaky. I'm not sure why. It was pretty windy up. I was at the back of my garage, so I don't know. Anyways, I'm cutting the half laps right here, and I know you can't see it on camera, but I actually just made a mistake cutting this middle one. I'll point it out later. I cut on the wrong side of my line, and it was, at the time, it was bothering me. I couldn't figure out why it happened, and then I went back and watched the video, and I saw, well, I guess I didn't see, but I put it together that I cut on the wrong side of my line. Here I decided I was going to double up on the components because this was a lot. I should have put a dado stack into my table saw, but I thought it was not going to be too long. I'll get this done. And my fingers were quite sore holding these pieces down. Just a little cleanup on the half laps here before I go to glue them up, and before I realized that I made a mistake cutting on the wrong side of the line. But like I said, overall everything came out pretty well, especially this for being the first time I've done half laps. And here I am realizing that is one blade width too wide. And another quick overview of the actual cuts and joints. Doesn't look too bad until you get to this middle one. Frustrating, but it'll never be seen. Here I am. I'm just drilling some dowel holes for some dowel pins. I'm using these strictly for alignment. The reason I'm choosing to do this, and I'm only doing a few on each board, is because I've done all of my milling already and I don't have much room for more removal of material. My planer is a 13-inch wide planer, and these shelves are going to be about 13 and 3/4. And so I decided to do a panel glue up that was almost to final size. So these 3 dowels that you see going into each shelf are strictly here for alignment to help with it, and I'll have some clamps on the end. All right, starting on the actual breadboards now. I've never done breadboards either. This is kind of a common theme of this project. I am just starting by taking out the center groove of the breadboard ends. I'm going to take that out on every piece. You see me flipping the board around. That's to ensure that this 1/4 inch bit leaves a centered groove. I don't care that it's greater than a 1/4 inch. I just want it to be perfectly centered. Then I move on to the actual shelf itself. I set up a stop for my router here, and I'm just taking off the waste material. A couple of these, the first, I think, shelf, maybe the first 2 2 shelves. Somehow I thought I had it set right, and I didn't check as often as I should, so those are a little bit looser than I'd like, but good news was that it was only on the short shoulder here, and once I cut my tenons, I get that adjusted, and then the tenons and the mortise and the breadboard end is a little bit tighter. And here I go, I'm starting to work on marking out my tenons. It's just a very arbitrary number. I just wanted them to look somewhat symmetrical. You might notice later on that they were not symmetrical, and that's because I realized that I cut my shelf panel here too short, so I had to go back on and glue some cutoffs back on. I just left those cutoffs wide, and I'll do the final trimming at the end. This was quite frustrating. I've had this new Concepts fret saw for a couple months, and here it is, it's breaking. I don't have any replacement blades, so I had to go to a different technique to get rid of this. I just kind of roughed it out with a cheap Cobalt handsaw that I have. I didn't want to do any unnecessary wear and tear on my nice handsaw, so I just used a cheap one, roughed it out, and then I used a file, or a rasp and a file to get it down to the shoulder that I wanted. And then here I am cutting the tenons and the breadboard end, taking several passes. I don't want to make sure that I'm over stressing the bit. And you can see that it sits nicely on there. I do not have a drill press, so I'm drilling out my dowel pin holes by hand. Not the best practice, I'm sure, but it worked, and it did just fine. Marking the center holes, and then I'll move that line, or that hole, just a little bit more towards the shoulder. I'm not going to show it because it's pretty awful, but I did have one shelf, but 2 tenons that had blowout because I did not have the tenon hole drilled appropriately. I put too close to the shoulder, Gluing in the front dowel pin, and then the back one's only going to get glued in just that little bit that's going to stick into the top part of this shoulder. And you can see how nicely that closed up. Getting ready to sand this. I'm cutting these down with a flush saw. It's kind of funny. I have a Festool dust extractor. I'm still using this cheap DeWalt sander. I've had this thing for 7 or 8 years. I'd really like to upgrade it. It's kind of at the end of its use for me. I've had to replace the pad several times, but it still gets the job done, and $400 or $500 for a sander is not in the budget. Since these breadboard ends were a little proud, I had to trim up one edge with the track saw, and then I trimmed up the other end on the table saw. I wanted to note here that I also used hide glue for the gluing of the shelves into the carcass. Hide glue, as many of you should know, it's reversible. And since these are the first time I'm making breadboard ends, I wanted to make sure that I planned for the possibility that these may or may not fail or crack in the future. I wanted to be able to remove them if that happened and then replace them. So hide glue it was. And I think it worked out great.